I am so happy to be here. I really am excited to be here. I've done this particular presentation many, many times all over the country, and this is the first time I've ever done it here. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see a lot of familiar faces. Scott, you thought you were going to hide. I saw you there. I just didn't get over to say hi yet. And we're going to have some fun. I think learning should be fun. So that's one of the things we're going to do today. I need a couple volunteers. I need 3 volunteers. Who would like to volunteer? Barb, there's 1. Genesis, that's 2. Genesis, that's 2. Steve, that's 3. Okay? All right. So when it comes time, remember who they were. All right? Okay. Put these down here. Don't let me forget that when we get the context, they're there. All right. So everybody who knows me knows one of my passions is helping people learn using technologies. And the reason that I chose visuals to start with is because this is something you can do quickly, you can do it easily, it doesn't cost you any more to do it right than it does to do it incorrectly, and it is a very easy way to get your learning materials into really good shape. So we're going to talk today about visuals you listen with your eyes. All right, this is who I am. I didn't make e-learning, but I make it better. I am passionate about what I do. I've had my own company, Advantage Learning Technologies, since 2002. The other me, there's literature coming around. I'm the director of the graduate program in Instructional Technology Management at LaSalle University, lasalle.edu/ITM, if you're interested in more information. The postcards are for our Lunchtime Learning series. They start next Tuesday with scenario-based learning. They are online and they are free. So you are welcome to join us. All right, enough. You can't learn them, but we try. But you can't learn them. The only person that can learn for you is you. You can't teach them something they already know. When we like to have $1 for every dollar spent trying to teach people something that they already know. You can design instruction that increases the probability that they will learn. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And you can design your visuals for the way people learn. So that's what we're talking about. That's why we're here. How do people learn? We don't know. We don't know. So I'm going to talk to you about something we don't know. We really don't. What we do know is that there are a lot of theories out there on learning. There are books and books and books. Hundreds of theories on learning. Trilogy of the Mind happens to be my own theory of learning. And what I say very simply is that there are 3 domains of the mind. There's the affective domain, which is how you feel. There's the cognitive domain, which is how you think. And there's the conative domain, which is how you do what you do. Now, the affective domain most people understand. Feelings is something most people understand. When we talk about learning, what we want to be concerned with is the fact that there are feelings. We don't want bored. On the continuum between bored, disengaged, and tuned in, tapped in, turned on, there's a wide range of emotions. And almost any emotional engagement is better than no emotional engagement. How we think, there's a lot of stuff done. We're going to be talking today about cognition, about the cognitive domain. And conation, we're not going to talk a lot about today. Conation is your natural instinct, your firmware. How you do what you do naturally. And when I explain conation, just so you understand what we're talking about, I used my old dog Max. I had a retriever. His name was Max. When Max was 9 months old, I moved Max to a little cottage that we were renting while we were building a house. And there was a gun club right behind this this cottage. And every Wednesday and every Sunday they would have shoots. And every time Max would hear a gunshot, Max would run up to my kids' beds, grab a stuffed animal, bring it down and pile them up in front of the door. Now, Max never went to retriever training. Max never went to retriever school. How did he know how to retrieve? He came onto the planet knowing how to retrieve. That's conation. It's what he did naturally because he was a retriever. What is the learning zone? This is something we talk about all the time, positioning people where they have the highest probability of learning. Jeff Hopkins, who invented the Palm Pilot, talks about transition in learning going through at least 3 different visual areas of the brain before you get up to IT, which is where transfer occurs. When they first decided to develop artificial intelligence in the 60s, everybody thought it was going to be easy. We had all this computing power. We were going to have expert systems and artificial intelligence. But they found out learning was not that easy. Creating intelligence was about more than facts and figures and cognition. So Jeff says you have to go through 4 visual regions to recognize an object. Okay? You don't have to remember this. And by the way, if you want these PowerPoints, they're on my website, so you can download them. What I want you to see here is that it's not quick. In order for your brain to pick it up, it's not quick. Ruth Clark has done some work. Clark, Nugent Sweller, Richard Mayer, E-Learning and the Science of Instruction. If you haven't heard of that, she talks a lot about cognition, how we take things in cognitively. And she talks about working memory. In order to get something into the brain, it has to pass, first of all, we have to get it into working memory. Then we got to keep it in working memory long enough or repeat it in working memory often enough that the brain remembers. We can't get it over to long-term memory unless it goes through working memory first. So it has to go through working memory to get over here. Once it gets in long-term memory, we can use things like schemas and encoding and retrieval to get the information in and pull it out. Once again, what I want you to remember is that it's not easy. It's not fast. Your brain has to have something to grab onto. And one of the things that we want to do in learning to grab on is the very first thing we need to do is we need to get people's attention. If we don't get your attention, if you're not paying attention to me, I don't have a clue. I don't have a hope. And we don't want to distract them. So we want to gain their attention, but we don't want to distract them. If it doesn't go in, it can't come out. All right, so these are our learning objectives for today. We want to recognize what good visual design is. We want to be able to create well-designed learner interfaces. Good design and good design for learning are not always the same thing. A lot of times they are, but not always. And then we want to design instruction using good visuals. Why? Because we want people to learn. Here's what we do know about people learn. A lot of research has been done that shows these 3 areas particularly are very influential, significantly influential, if we're using research terms, in how people learn. The first one is prior knowledge. The second one is context. And the third one is expectations. So prior knowledge. Prior knowledge is all about something called NAPs, neuro-associative pathways. They asked the head of Yale Neurology to explain how the brain works. And he said in 5 words, your brain works in patterns. That's all you have to remember. Your brain works in patterns. And that's all a NAP is. Once a neuro-associative pathway has been traveled, it's easy to travel down it again, which is what prior knowledge is all about. Prior knowledge is like hanging clothes in a closet. If you have something that is familiar to you, you're more likely to hang something there that's familiar to you. You know, if I try to teach you Calculus 3, you've never had Calculus 2, good luck with that. You don't have anything to hang the knowledge on. So every piece of knowledge that you take in, you take a look and you say, is this really me? Do I have a place to put this? Do I have a place to fit this in my brain? Now, you don't consciously think of that, but you're making those decisions. So prior knowledge is all about you need a place to hang the new information. Context. When we talk about context, I have a couple quick little demonstrations about what context is all about. Here, you guys take a couple of these. We'll put a couple of these over here. Don't be shy, folks. Now, we get a couple of these over here. Now we throw a couple of these over here. I'm going to ask for volunteers again, and we are going to read our fortune cookies. We'll only do 2 or 3 of these. And after we read our fortune cookies, all I want you to say is 2 words. In bed. Somebody do that. All right? All right? So we're going to crack open the fortune cookie. You're going to read the fortune cookie. And then after you read the fortune cookie, you're going to say 2 words. What 2 words? Okay, here we go. Go ahead, you can go first.
You are kind and friendly.
Good, go.
There is a prospect of a thrilling time ahead for you in bed.
Good. How about one more over here, Dennis?
Learn Chinese. In bed.
There we go. All right, here's another example of context. Whatever I say, you're going to say I do. Okay? All right. Do you think the Eagles are going to make it to the playoffs this year?
I do.
How about the Flyers? You think the Flyers are going to be any good this year?
I do.
Okay. Do you, Nathan, take this woman, Noelle, to be your...
Don't do that to me.
I'm teasing him because he just got married, everybody.
One month anniversary yesterday.
But the only word we were going to say was, I do. So that's context, right? That's what context is all about. Context gives things relevance. Or not. You can position something so out of context that it's memorable. So when we talk about things that are out of context that are so memorable, one of the best examples I can give you is the Geico commercials. They use it to a T. They're very, very good at putting an element in there that is so out of context that you will remember it. You know, the caveman, the talking money, the little lizard. The third element in how people learn is expectations. It is the most powerful word in learning. We start with attention. From attention, we move to something called perception, which is how you take it in. No 2 people in this room perceive things the same way. You do not see the same way. Has anybody had the experience of driving down a road that they've been driving down every day for years, and all of a sudden you'll see a tree or a house or something that you never noticed before? But you've been passing it and looking at it every day for years. Our perception is unique. From perception, we move to something called visualization. Visualization is the ability to perceive in your mind. And from visualization, we move to something called imagination. And that's the ability to not only see, but to create. So, when we look at this happy couple, or are they a happy couple? What do we see? What do you see? Somebody tell me what you see. Okay. What do you see?
Well, as soon as you said happy couple, I thought she's saying, I can't wait for this picture to be done.
She can't wait for this picture to be done. Are they married?
Yeah.
See a ring.
No, I've had people tell me it's his mistress. They're way too happy to be married.
Yeah, but He doesn't look that happy.
He doesn't look that happy, so maybe that's the case. Who knows? The point is, depending on where you're coming from, you can imagine a lot of things and associate a lot of different feelings with that little picture. Einstein, the famous picture of Einstein. Everybody knows the quote, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. For while knowledge defines all we currently know and understand, imagination points to all we might yet discover and create." All right, so now it's quiz time. A little review here, just to make sure everybody's awake, didn't fall asleep. Context. What does context provide? Relevance. Absolutely. Prior knowledge. Is prior knowledge important because it lets us know what the learner already knows? True or false? False. It's the hook we hang on. Expectations. Expectations are not important to the imagination. True or false? False. False. Absolutely. All right. Still your turn. What's wrong? What's wrong with this picture? She is trapped. What's wrong? Expectations, prior knowledge, context, or D, all of the above? D, all of the above. You don't expect to see a girl in the dryer. You expect to see socks in the dryer. Right. You don't expect to see water in the, yeah. So it violates all three of the above. Content is king. You want to remember in learning that content is important. That's why you're there, is to deliver the content, okay? To get people to think about it. So you don't want to use things that distract, visuals that distract from your content. Take a look at this chart. How many people have seen PowerPoints that look like this? Nobody has seen a PowerPoint. I could go home. We're talking about Hurricane Katrina. This is a typical screen where somebody has tried to cram every single piece of information they could possibly fit out there on that screen because they are sure it is so important. Now take a look at that and tell me what you feel. Now take a look at that. Which one gives you feeling? Which one attracts you? This one or this one? So one of the questions you want to ask when you ask yourself, are my visuals any good? How do I feel about them? What do these screens make me feel like? What's this presentation make me feel like? And if you are not honest, then ask a colleague, ask your kids, ask somebody else. How do these make you feel? Why use people? People are important. Ruth Clark came out a few years back and said use only relative graphics. So everybody went around using only charts and pie charts. And no. Relative graphics are graphics that engage you, that do not distract. People are important. And research shows that people are important primarily because we're like monkeys. We like to watch ourselves. We like to look at other people. We get engaged when there are other people up there to look at. A lot of the research that was done primarily when this first started out was through a show that everybody's familiar with called Sesame Street. Sesame Street did not have people in it. It just had Muppets in it. And they did a lot of research that showed that kids would walk away. I mean, they put TV screens up and watched the behavior of thousands of children. And the kids would walk away much more when there were just Muppets and there were no people. And that's why they added the people to Sesame Street, because people are interested in watching people, not just stuff. So tell me something about this girl.
She's had a crick in her neck for a long time.
She's had a crick in her neck for a long time. Okay, what else?
She's left-handed.
She's a good left-hander. She's left-handed. What else?
She's married.
She's married.
There's the ring.
She's a Band-Aid and a ring. Okay. What else? Tell me something about her personality. Okay? She's kind, she's compassionate. Tired, I hear that often. She looks like a working woman. She looks like she's ready to go to sleep at the desk.
Great job of matching the lipstick with the clothes.
Now, how about this girl? They're both blonde. They're both about the same age. What comes to mind when we see this lady? What?
JFK.
JFK. That was bad. That's really bad. What else? What else comes to mind? Sex. It's Marilyn Monroe, for God's sakes. Right? I mean, she was the sex symbol of an entire century, for heavens. So you want to be conscious of the kinds of people that you're using. Okay? If it's a work situation, you want to use somebody that connotes work, not somebody who connotes, okay? And because they're young and they're blonde and they're both around late 20s, that's not enough, okay? All right, here's one of the things I do want you to remember. I don't care if you remember the other stuff, but I want you to remember crap. All right? Now here's where crap came from. Back when I was not Dr. Baggio and I was still Mrs. Baggio, I was teaching high school. I used to teach high school at Whitehall High School in Whitehall, Pennsylvania for 6 years. I was teaching a desktop publishing class. And this is not new. Crap is not mine. A lot of people talk about crap. But I was writing these on the board: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity when it comes to visual design. And I wrote it on the board, and one of my dear high school students raised his hand and said, "Mrs. Baggio, that spells crap." And I was like, yes, and that is what your stuff is going to be if you don't follow these principles. So we're going to start with the first one, contrast. What is contrast? And why is contrast important in learning? What is contrast? Somebody tell me. What do we see? What's the contrast? Opposites. Emphasis. What's different here? Textures are different. Focus is different. Colors are different. How about here? Size. Size. What else? Age. What else? Body objects, hands and feet are opposites. So that's another way we can establish contrast. How about here? Big and small, age, positioning, on the stool, on the floor, age, placement. How about here?
What is that?
Good versus evil, healthy versus unhealthy. Now let me ask, they're both carbohydrates, right? There's no protein on there, you're right. Let me ask you a question. Would that picture be as effective? Would you find it as memorable if we had one donut versus one apple? No. So one rule of contrast, this is all you have to remember. If it's different, make it very different, or make it the same. If you make it too similar for learning, what it does is confuse the brain. So if you have a 20 font, don't put a 24 font next to it. If you're using a light blue, don't put a shade darker blue next to it and think you have contrast. Because what it does is get your brain confused, and your brain is trying to figure out what's going on here. All right, repetition. Where do we see repetition here? Shoes, so the object. The groupings, they're 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and 3. Where else? The highlighting. Where else? The colors, there's a repetition in the colors, absolutely. By the way, this is International Design Magazine. The shoelaces. The patterns, thank you. 2 up, 1 down. Colors, numbers, positions, subject. Repetition plays into those naps we were talking about before. There's neuroanalytical pathways, neuroassociative pathways. Okay, so you want to do it again and again and again. Alignment. Alignment makes it easier for the learner to take it in. Symmetry, positions, white space, and balance. We're going to talk about this as we go on. Here's one of the things I want you to remember with alignment. We live in a Western society. We read from left to right. Do not center your text unless you have a really good reason. Because what it does is it makes reading next to impossible. Your brain starts to go, where do I find the end? Okay, we are used to left alignment. So if you don't remember anything else about alignment, remember, when in doubt, left align. Okay, how about this one? What's wrong with this? These are real life examples. This stuff I could not have made up. This is a real life example. What's wrong here? It's chaos. It's chaos. Your eye, where does your eye fall on this screen? All over the place. Your eye has no idea where to fall. The alignment is absolutely terrible. So when you talk about alignment, we're not just talking about the text, we're talking about the objects in the pictures too. We're talking about the hard edge. Let's see if we can get. Notice how this photograph of the person goes into the picture. It all becomes the screen. Your brain takes the entire screen in it as one image. Okay? Once we go over to here and we have square pictures, we break that alignment every single time. Your eye has no idea where to fall. I mean, this is almost nauseating. Yet this came to me on a real life power deck. Some people are going, yeah, I know it did, Bobbie. It did. These were what was being used to train. All right, how about this one? What's wrong with this one? The colors, and the alignment is the big one, right? Your eye is having a hard time. You're having a hard time reading this. You're having a very difficult time reading this. All right, proximity. Proximity is all about unity, harmony, balance, and scale. So if we take a look at Ronnie here on Time Magazine, notice that we put the tier right across from the caption, how the right went wrong. Notice how we have all the sub-stories up top and together. Proximity is positioning. What's wrong with this picture? This was a real one. I couldn't make these up. I couldn't make these up.
I've actually seen this before.
Yeah, this gets used a lot. Somebody told me, Noelle, did you tell me this was a Microsoft?
It is.
It's a clip art down below. Somebody told me that. So what's wrong with this picture? D, all of the above. Contrast. We have 3 shades of blue. Your eyes are already going like, are those supposed to be different, or am I just seeing things funny? Repetition. The only repetition here is the puzzle pieces. Even the captions, the fonts, everything is a different size, it's a different color, it's a different position. There is no alignment here. Your eye has no idea where to fall for alignment. Now, the reason I put this up here is not to show you what bad is. We all see lots of positions of bad. But the person who designed this really thought he was doing wonderful work when he did this. This was an entry screen into an e-learning module. And each one of these were different areas, and he wanted to get across it was for a call center. He wanted to get across the idea that it was complex, that they were interlocking. I mean, he had good intention. He just didn't follow some basic rules. So, how about this one? What's wrong with this picture? There's no alignment. Yeah, you could make a case for D, all of the above again, but the big one here, the big one, is that there's no alignment at all. This is also an entry screen for a general ledger module. Now, there's nothing else I could say. Okay. So, let's talk a little bit real quickly about how you think. A lot of what we're talking about with visuals is about how you think. It's about cognitive learning theory. Cognitive learning theory has been around since the 50s, 60s. I picked up a book that our psychology department was throwing out. And there was one chapter, it was on learning theory, there was one chapter in the back on cognition. Constructivism was not even in there yet, and it was dated 1968. Yeah, so that tells you how far we've come in a very short period of time. Cognitive learning theory says we have two primary channels going into the brain, the visual channel and the auditory channel. And you can only think one thought at a time. You can't think two thoughts at a time. You can think them in rapid succession, but you can only think one thought at a time. When I first, hello? Dave! When I first started learning about learning, I was in the park walking with my dogs. And my kids had always told me, I knew I was a visual learner. I just didn't know how bad it really was. My kids had always told me, Mom, you're not listening. You're not listening. And like I always say, being a great mother, I just ignored them. So I'm walking the dogs, and I have an audiobook playing. And I realize, while I'm walking the dogs and listening to this audiobook, I'm not listening to this book at all. I am having an entire conversation with myself in my head that has nothing to do with this book. And that's very typical of a visual learner. There are those people who are sitting out here right now having an entire conversation in their heads about what I'm saying, and that's a clue that you might be a visual learner. How else do you know you might be a visual learner? Do you make lists? If you make lists, you might be a visual learner. Do you underline texts? Do you outline things? You might be a visual learner if. The two other predominant learning styles are auditory and something called kinesthetic. Now, kinesthetic has become popular because somebody came out with the theory of learning by doing. Don't confuse that with kinesthetic learning. They are totally different things. Kinesthetic learning as a learning style is an input mode. You might know you're a kinesthetic learner if you like small things, if you like to do very close engineering kind of things, programming kind of things. If you're a big picture, you're probably an auditory or a visual learner. Okay, are we good here? All right. So, one of the things that a lot of research has been done about is managing cognitive load. And what cognitive load says is basically, if you put too much in working memory, the brain just says, forget it, and it doesn't take it in. You can only hold something in working memory 5 to 10 seconds at the max without repetition. So you don't have a long time to make that imprint and get it from working memory either into V2, V4, or IT, depending on whose schema and whose labeling you're using. Learning occurs by active processing in the memory system. All right, it's time for a little active processing here. Who are my volunteers? There's one. There's two. You're going to keep track of this. And who was three? Barb. What do you want to be, Barb? X's or O's? Genesis, you're keeping track of this. You're keeping track of what do you want to be? X's? X's? All right. Steve?
I'll be O's.
O's. Okay. Barb? Great, Steve. We'll get along just fine. All right, Barb, where do you want to go? Go ahead. Give us the first one here.
I want to go on the...
Oh, wait a minute. O's get the starts.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Well, that's tough. I'll go in the upper right-hand corner.
Oh, jeez. What a party. Oh, that was too easy. All right. I got another challenge for you. You ready?
Sorry.
All right. We're going to play the same game. We're going to play the same game again. Barb, this time you get to go first. You still get to be X's. Steve, you still get to be O's.
Okay.
Genesius, you're keeping track of this. All right. Go ahead, Barb. Give me an X. All I have to do is call it number 1. Go ahead, Steve. Let's go.
5.
4.
Steve.
2.
7.
8.
Genesius, where are we?
She won.
Barb 1.
Yay! Where's my prize?
We're not done. We're still playing. Bring the banjo. We're still playing. All right. Now, this time, you still get to be X's, but you got to call the number out where you want the X to go. And you still get to be O's, but you got to call the number out. Remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Remember that? Okay. Go.
1.
Okay, Steve.
5.
Barb.
4.
7.
Come on.
3.
Okay.
2.
Okay.
6.
8. We got an 8. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was going to say 8, but...
Go ahead. Jesus, what are we doing? Go ahead.
5. For nobody's in here.
Well, 5 was already called.
6.
Is there anybody who's going to win? No. Okay.
I want the people up there to shout out 8-4.
Do I still get a prize?
Cindy is big on the prizes. Cindy always has prizes. What are we doing here? What did I do to you? Why did we do this? Too much in working memory. Thank you very much. We increased the cognitive load. We started out with a simple game. The rules are known. The symbols are known. The positions are known. And it was very, very easy. We had a winner in 2 seconds. It was easy for you. We moved to a little bit harder here. We had visual help. We had numbers that we could call in the position. And then we took everything away and we asked you to remember in working memory not only the number but the position and the symbol for the position. So we increased your cognitive load. And everybody will agree it was harder to play tic-tac-toe like this than it was like this, right? Okay. All right, little rule of thumb here. When you position the text, you want to position the text as part of the picture. Because when you put the text underneath the picture like this, your eye looks at that and then goes down and tries to read the text. If we put it as part of the picture, it comes in easily in one image. Here's all I want you to remember about text and learning. Less is more. You don't have to remember anything else. Less is more. People do not read screens. It comes in as an image. All of that black space is really white space. And white space is very important. White space is power. White space gives the brain a break. It gives it a rest. It lets it say what is important. Fonts. Sans serif fonts. Sans serif fonts for screens, serif fonts for print. That's what research shows. You're more likely to remember it. Sans serif fonts are the ones without the little curly cues. Serif fonts are the ones with the little curly cues. So on screens, you want to use the sans serif fonts, Arial, Verdana, Tahoma. For print, you want to use the serif fonts. Times New Roman, Garamond. Why are you using capital letters? There was a thing on Yahoo like this week or last week that somebody actually got fired and then got a good attorney. Did you see that? Yes. For using all capital letters in an email because they said she was screaming at somebody. Netiquette has done a lot of research on what people consider to be polite and correct and friendly on the net. And overwhelmingly, resoundingly, their research shows that when you use capital letters, people think you're screaming at them, okay? Even more importantly than that, from a learning standpoint, you're confusing the brain. What do we capitalize? The first letter of a sentence, proper names, proper nouns. All your life, for how many ever years you've been on the planet, that's what your brain's been trained to look at. Then all of a sudden, people gave us PowerPoint, and we went nuts. We started capitalizing everything arbitrarily for no reason. All right, how about this one? What's wrong with this? It's way too much text. It's very difficult to read in terms of contrast. Light on dark is never as easy to take in as dark on light. The best contrast you can have for learning is black text on a white background. That's why they printed books like that forever. Okay? This is also a wonderful example of people who just arbitrarily started capitalizing stuff. She just capitalizes career-based programming. I mean, these aren't proper nouns. So whenever you use text besides less is more, you want to remember that readability is key. If it looks like this, it's probably not readable. You want to talk about managing cognitive load. Learners have a limited amount of capacity, and you want to use something called chunking. Now, I always assume everybody in the world knows what chunking is. What is chunking?
Breaking it up into usable portions.
Breaking it up into usable portions, and what's the law of chunking? 7 plus or minus 2. Where that came from was George Miller published an article in 1958, Psychology Today, that said all working memory can hold without going, I'm on overload, is 7 plus or minus 2 units of information at one time. So that's where chunking came from. You see chunking all over the place. It's why your social security number is broken up the way it's broken up. It's why your phone number is chunked the way it's chunked. 7 plus or minus 2. So if you've ever wondered why Stephen Covey has 7 habits of highly effective people and not 8, now you know. If you've ever wondered why Deepak has 7 laws of spiritual success, you'll see this number 7 a whole lot. Somebody told me that this 12 steps would have had a better chance if it would have been 5 and 7. Some basic rules for visuals. Use relative graphics. Use graphics that have a purpose. Use high quality graphics of a similar type. What I mean by that is you do not want to mix line art with photos. Now, I am going to tell you here that every rule I'm telling you can be broken. Every single rule I've told you tonight about visuals can be broken. But if you break it, you better know why you're breaking it. You better have a reason for breaking it. Otherwise, it's just bad design. So you don't want to mix those two unless you have a good reason. Use graphics to get your point across and use graphics to support your learning. When you lay a screen out, anybody who paints or is a photographer will tell you the law of thirds. What you do is you break the screen into 1/3 down, 1/3 across, up and down. Your eye, research shows your eye naturally falls from left to right on the screen. So the PowerPoints on your screen are where the red dots are, from left to right. Okay? That's how your eye naturally falls along the canvas. Now, all that being said, we're going to come up with some examples here real quick that you're not going to believe. Special rules. Use light backgrounds with dark text. These are for PowerPoints. Limit the background graphics. We can tell stories about that. You know, don't use any kind of background graphics unless you have a real good reason. Use basic layouts with room for your content. Format your master slide for consistency. All right, this is a real one, folks. These people do 150 courses a year for the federal government. Your tax dollars at work. What's wrong with this? What's the subject? Can somebody tell me what we're supposed to be studying here? Budget and policy. Thank you very much. Do you see where that is? Budget and policy. Where does your eye fall on the screen? This is a template that was used by the agency that's up there that I really do have to change their name because I'll get sued eventually. Where's your eye naturally fall? What's the first thing that you see on the screen? Yeah, most people, there was a rumor going around for a while that yellow on blue backgrounds was good for PowerPoint. It was just a rumor. They were lying. NTI is red. If you use red, your eye is going to go right to that on the screen. Remember, white space is power, and white space does not have to be white. The reason that you use white space is to give the brain a rest. Color. You want to be very careful when you use color in texts. Red from green, blue from brown. 1 in every 12 men and 65 women report colorblindness, which means they are not going to be able to read that. So you want to be very, very careful. Here's the rule of thumb on color. No more than 2 primary colors on a screen. And here's the bad news. That includes the graphic. So if you've got a full color graphic, you already broke the rule. So you want to use 1 color in the text. You do not want to use 2 colors in the text. No more than 2 primary colors on a screen. Watch color families and feelings. And I can't tell you how many times I see this in PowerPoint decks and e-learning stuff that people send to me. They want so much to emphasize something, so they'll put a different colored box around every piece of text, and there'll be 6 different colored boxes on the screen with 2 different colors of text in there. It's not because they're not trying. They mean well. It just doesn't work. All right, last but not least, this was a friend of mine, Claire Boger, who did this, brought this to us at the e-learning guild a while ago, but it got me going, and we think, because we are dealing with LMSs and learning management systems, that visuals no longer apply. Guess what? Wrong. The grid is a technique. It is used widely across the web. If you look at CNN, you look at Yahoo, you look at any of the big websites, you'll see that it is laid out on a grid principle. There is a ton of information. Google it out there. There's a ton of information on the grid. What the grid says is we will use visuals to drive you to action. Okay? We will use visuals to drive you to action. So it's treating the learner as a consumer. How many people have seen an LMS screen that looks like this? Yeah? Isn't that enticing? Doesn't that want to make you jump in there and learn? So what we did is we took a few of these items, chunked them, broke them up, and came up with this. Now, which one is more appealing for learning? This? Glad you're here, Dave. We're almost done, folks. Obviously, the second one is much more visually appealing. It makes you want to do something. First of all, you can sort of figure out what might want to be done. All right, summary. Here we go. Identify the 4 elements of good screen design. What are the 4 elements of good screen design? Crap. What are they? Crap. Contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Determining ways to minimize cognitive load. How can we minimize the cognitive load? Chunk it. How else? Put the text in the picture. The grid? Absolutely. How else? Less is more. Thank you. Thank you. Recognize best practices for white space and color. What do we want to remember about color? No more than 2 primary colors on a screen, and that includes the full color picture you already put on there. Use good graphics that enhance learning. And good graphics are what? Emotion. Graphics are good if they help gain your learner's attention and they appeal emotionally to the learner. They give you a chance to connect a feeling with the picture. Organize instruction using graphics. All right, that's it, folks. Any questions? Okay.
Just a quick one. You said that these were on your website. Is that your
Yes. No. Bobbie Baggio, BOBBEBAGGIO.com. Programs and products, they're under freebies.
What are your thoughts on using animation videos in a presentation, or misusing or using?
We misuse more than we use
Why don't you repeat the question, sir?
Okay, the question is, what are my thoughts on using animations and videos in a presentation? Or misusing. Using or misusing. My response to that is we're on a video high these days. We're using videos in everything. There are websites out there that have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 video. Nobody watches those unless there's a good reason. I want you to know that now. You know, I guess YouTube was the catalyst that, you know, there's a reason. It's like Facebook. There's a reason Facebook was so successful, and one of the reasons Facebook was first successful with the adolescent generation is think about the ego. Think about the feelings that you have as an adolescent. Think about how much it's important for you to project your image to the world as an adolescent. Now the group that's using Facebook is predominantly 40 to 60-year-olds. So they're the grandmas and the moms kind of generation. And if you think about that too, I mean, we got pictures of the kids up there. You know, so it's an emotional kind of thing again. If you use an animation, it better be good, there better be a reason for it, and it better not be annoying. So the first question you want to ask with an animation is it annoying? If you're even thinking about yes, get it out of there. With videos, the big mistake we make with videos is we don't tie it in to the rest of the content. We don't tie it into the rest of the learning. So we'll put a piece of multimedia, whether it's a simulation or a video or whatever, out there. We'll drop it out there and expect it to carry itself. And that's it. We don't ever wrap it around. We don't ever bring it around. We don't ever reinforce it. So I think they're wonderful. I think you can do a lot with them. I think if you're using them over the web, you want to remember cognitive load. And cognitive load on the web, your working memory team is shorter than it is in just a regular situation. So for most people, 5 minutes, 10-minute video on the web is a long video. It's a long video. They've already gone and gotten coffee and they're cleaning their refrigerator. Yeah.
I just had a thought while you were talking about the website. And there seem to be sort of patterns that emerge, where there are design patterns that are adopted. It seemed like you could take advantage of that. Because people get used to looking at stuff in a certain way.
Neuroassociative pathways, DAPs. Yeah, you get used to looking at things the same way. And I'm sure there are. I mean, there's been a whole evolution since we started with usability. You know, when we started with web usability and Krug's Don't Make Me Think, and then Nielsen came out, Jacob Nielsen came out with the first usability studies. A lot of what Nielsen said then he himself has disproved, because we're 10 years, 15 years down the pike. You know, we're learning. We're learning as we go. And I think we'll learn more about what works with web layout and interface layout, and we'll make changes. But absolutely there are patterns. I mean, there's a reason that all those sites look so similar, because it works.
What about imagery? Like, some people are symmetrical learners and like visually, and I know, like, I have photographic memory, but if it's asymmetrical, I cannot memorize it.
So what are you asking me?
Because you said don't center everything.
No, absolutely don't, especially text.
Right.
I'm going to tell you that from a design standpoint, more likely, you are more likely to make a cognitive impression with asymmetry than with symmetry. Okay? Not always. Every rule is made to be broken. I think when you look at whether you're going to use symmetry or asymmetry, you want to look at your content. You want to look at what you're trying to get across. If we put two things here on the screen, right here on the screen, which is the position of power? The left. This is the one that gets seen. Your eye falls like this. So this is not in the same power position as this is. Yeah.
When you look at PowerPoint, sometimes you get like this stuff, slide deck like this thick. And you especially use so many
points on a slide, but sometimes the slides can get,
Oh, I know.
how do you balance that out between content and the number of slides?
Do you work with engineers? Scientists? How did I know? How did I know? You know, it's kind of like Winston Churchill. Do the best you can where you are with what you have. And that's sometimes the best you can do. Particularly in the sciences and the engineers. I explain to people why I want to do what I want to do. And it's a give and take. You know, sometimes you have to let that god-awful chart that nobody is going to understand anything that's squeezed on there. You have to let it in there because the SME is in love with it. And you're pushing them on everything else, you know. I do find that if you explain to people why, and then you ask them instinctively, look at that and then look at this one. If you show them a good one next to what they've been seeing, they have to admit that this is better. 99% of the time they'll buy that if you explain what's behind it. What we have a tendency to do in ID is we have a tendency to get frustrated, and we have a tendency to say, this is the way it should be, why won't you do it that way? You know, and we have a whole group of people out there to educate. We have a wonderful opportunity to not only do this ourselves, and I will say one thing, all the examples that I had in here were all from trainers. Okay, so this was not the director of sales, or this was not, you know, the scientist. These are people who are in the learning business. And we have to clean up our own house first. As far as the length of things, my comment on that is tell people this is how long it will work. You know, people come up all the time. I have an hour-and-a-half webinar with 500 people in it. Okay. It is what it is. You're creating the learning environment that you're creating. Does that mean nobody is going to learn anything in that webinar? Absolutely not. But are you going to have the same kind of webinar and the same kind of engagement that we could have with 30 slides in half an hour, 45 minutes, and 15 of us chatting? No, you're not. So the answer is it's not the answer you want to hear. You do the best you can, you know. And it's tough with that crowd because that is a group that does tend to be kinesthetic learners. They tend to learn very deductively, very detail. Yeah, Dave.
In a practical way, maybe I could add to it, because you're already doing this. You're making the slides available for us, and in the case you just mentioned, there's a good slide that you created and the one with all the mumbo jumbo that the engineer created. And when you're actually doing the training, hide the engineer slide. No one's going to know the difference. And give out all the slides unhidden at the end, and everyone will be happy. Japanese engineer.
Yeah. And you'll never get a contract there again. Did you have your hand up?
Yes, I wondered if there's any evidence of different learning styles between undergraduates or people like that and graduates and people like that in terms of the approach.
The approach, yes. The approach, yes. Here, one of the talks that I do, and I just did this one. In fact, some of you may have to listen to it again Saturday. But it's 5 easy ways to help adults learn. And the way I define an adult is someone who is socially accepted as an adult. Now that would include, for the most part, most of our undergraduates. It depends on who you look. People will say, you know, the magic number is 18. You know, you're after 18, you're an adult. Some people say after you get out of college and you've completed those 4 years, then you're an adult. The National Center for Continuing Education defines it. The bottom line is, an adult is somebody who is mature enough to accept responsibility for their own learning. Okay? Other than that, what the research shows is that the generation that is coming up now, the millennials, are even more visual than we were. So we're about 85% visual, 10% auditory, 5% kinesthetic, if you look at the research. It's that heavy. This new group that's coming up, and I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if it's like we're morphing, you know, because, I mean, these people have been flooded with visuals their entire lives everywhere they turn, you know, and so I don't know if they're becoming even more visual because they're just being inundated with visuals. I don't know, but research shows that they are even more visual than we were in terms of learning. Yeah.
Could you say more about line art versus photos? Because you said don't mix them. The preference for, it looks like you have a preference for photos.
I do, and there's a reason for that. Line art, although it may be cute, although it may take up space, it does not really provoke much feeling. It's much easier to get an emotion with a photo than it is with line art. Now, that being said, there are occasions where I have used line art for emphasis, to bring something that I want to bring out and emphasize as an emphasis. Generally speaking, though, I don't use much line art. I prefer photos. If you're looking for photos, photos.com, iStock Photos. Anybody else got some sites? Jupiter Images is another one. I just heard. Noelle, you're always good at this stuff.
Yeah, MS Office, their photos are getting
And better yet, go to the e-learning blog and look under Joe's freebies, and we got all kind of stuff out there for